Hi, good day to everyone, and I am Associate Professor Peter Julian Gaiton of the School of Statistics in the University of the Philippines, Diliman, here to talk about a technical report on the Ethnicity Registry framework. I would like to thank the organizers, the Philippine Statistical Research and Training Institute, in giving me the opportunity to present and talk about this technical report in the Research Forum 2021. Now this presentation, I'm showing the outline right now, so I'm just going to introduce some concepts from the Sustainable Development Goals, especially those mentioning ethnicity, some background literature in terms of the conceptual framework of ethnicity and identity, review of registration systems in selected countries in the Philippines, United States, and Canada, and also to present the proposed framework for an ethnicity registry. Now, in the Sustainable Development Goals, these are 17 Sustainable Development Goals and 169 targets, and they seek to build on the Millennium Development Goals and complete what they did not achieve. Now, those mentioning ethnicity are specifically Goal 10, to reduce inequality within and among countries, of which in 10.2 by 2030, empower and promote the social, economic, and political inclusion of all, irrespective of age, sex, disability, race, ethnicity, origin, religion, or economic or other status. Goal 17 is to strengthen the means of implementation and revitalize the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development. In the subcategory Data Monitoring and Accountability, in 17.18 by 2020, enhance capacity building support to developing countries, including for least developed countries and small island developing states, to increase significantly the availability of high quality, timely, and reliable data disaggregated by income, gender, age, race, ethnicity, migratory status, disability, geographic location, and other characteristics not relevant in national context. Now, let's look at some global definitions of ethnicity and indigenous peoples membership. Now, the UN broadly defines ethnicity as being based on a shared understanding of history and territorial origins of an ethnic group or community, as well as particular cultural characteristics such as language or religion. The Philippines and the United States generally recognize tribes by law through a recognition book or through its list of federally recognized tribes, respectively. Now, Canada is unique in a way that it employs individual registration for some tribes through the Indian register system, except for those belonging to the Métis and Inuit peoples. So, in this idea from the conceptual framework, so the membership on ethnicity and indigenous peoples to different ethnic groups and indigenous peoples or indigenous cultural communities, the main concept there is with ancestral origins through shared history, language, and culture. Now, generally, there's a lot of self-identification for ethnic identity and membership. However, we do have legal considerations in terms of recognition of membership and identity with regards to indigenous peoples or indigenous cultural communities, and these are aided by national regulations, as would have been seen with regards to the Philippines, US, and Canada. So a person may self-identify as a member of an ethnic or indigenous group, but certifications on some merit should be furnished as proof under national commissions or bureau, especially with regards to indigenous peoples or indigenous cultural community membership and identity. So to identify as a member of an indigenous group generally have benefits and privileges afforded for them under the principle of equitable access, such as scholarships, rights of ancestral domain, and waivers on some requirements for government law enforcement and military services. Now let's look at some registration systems in selected countries. In the Philippines, United States, and Canada. Now in the Philippines, the agency uh, would be the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples, or NCIP. Currently, the parent agency is the Department of Social Welfare and Development, and currently headed by the chairperson, Alan Arat Kapuyan. Alan Arat Kapuyan. The four rights and aspirations of the indigenous cultural communities and peoples based on RA 8371 are: first, the right to ancestral domain or ancestral land, the right to governance and empowerment, social justice and human rights, and cultural integrity. Now, there are three main programs of the NCIP as of 2018 AAR, and that would be the Ancestral Domain or Land Development Program, Human, Socio-Economic, and Ecology Development and Protection Program, and Indigenous Peoples' Rights Protection Services. Uh, Based on the 2010 census, there were 150 ICCs and IPs recognized by the NCIP based on the 2010 census. Now, the document that is issued by the NCIP is what we call the Certificate of Confirmation. Now, these are issued for the purposes that they are required of. So, for example, traveling abroad, scholarship applications, employment, and requirements for other government documents. Now, the NCIP only confirms that a person is a member of an ICC or IP. It is still requiring some verification of IP membership, so certificate of IP membership, coming from IP or ICC leaders of the ICC leaders who issue that certificate, and it is just confirmed by the NCIP. So once all requirements are submitted, they are processed, verified, and issued by the provincial or city officer or community service center head in provinces without provincial offices. So the certificate of confirmation, one of the requirements is the personal information index form, and you can see that on the left side of the slide. And there would also be a requirement for the photocopy of the birth certificate, and there's also going to be the requirement coming from the or issued by the IP leader or elder of the community where the applicant is a member or claims to be a member of. So the certificate of IP membership, as you can see on the right hand side. There is another requirement as well, the genealogical form. Which ties by birth an applicant to a member of the IP group, and then 2x2 photos and 2 pieces of documentary stamp. There are certain exceptional circumstances for the issuance of a COC. If an applicant whose immediate family member by descent already has a COC previously issued, then they only need the genealogy forms, photos, and documentary stamps. Cases where the applicant is included in the list of Certificate of Ancestral Domain Title, or CADT, would just require certification or verification coming from the provincial officer or community service center head. The approach with the certificate of confirmation is closely related, as we have observed, with the US system, which we will later discuss, in which certificates are only issued, and registry and the sources of information of heritage, so the registry of members, these are only in indigenous organizations or indigenous communities as kept by elders in a recognition book, and they're only recognized, these tribes, these communities, and indigenous peoples, which are recognized by NCIP. Now, some statistics about IPs or ICCs. On the special release of the 2000 CPH, 8.21% of the Philippine population was seen as members of indigenous peoples or indigenous cultural communities. ARMM had highest proportion at 21.69%, and then followed by Davao and Soxargen. Cordillera was the region of residence of 11.87% of IPs. On the most recent count as of 2012, it's around 8 in a unofficial count in a survey by NCIP. It's 8,067,100. In the United States, they issue what we call the Certificate of Degree of Indian or Alaskan Native Blood, which is facilitated by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, Department of the Interior. So this is issued by showing a proof of Indian or Alaskan Native heritage, which is generally you'll have to contact federally recognized tribes or do genealogical research and seeking concurrence from these tribes. So this is pretty much similar to the the Philippine system, decentralized membership rules. However, again, the limitation of this is the United States is not keeping a central database. Now, for information in the United States, the 0.9% of the U.S. population as of 2010 census are uh, American Indians or Alaskan natives. And Alaskan that are no combination, meaning they are not mixed blood. AIs or AMs with or without combination make up 1.5% of the US population. In Canada, they have an Indian register system facilitated by Indigenous Services Canada. And there is an ID card here, the status card, which has security features. So this certificate is in fact an ID card with security features, and this is facilitated by the Canadian government. This is now being done by the Indigenous Services Canada. There was a reform around 2019 to 2020 in terms of how the Indian Register is being facilitated by the Canadian government through the Indigenous Services Canada. Now, if there are First Nation borders overlapping the US-Canada border, then still the Canadian system recognizes US identity documentation in some instances. Now, an advantage of this is a central database exists to generate the statistics. The limitation of this one is not all tribes are part of it, so not all ethnicity. So for example, the Métis Confederation and the Inuit peoples, they're not part of the Indian register system. The Métis are they are from an ancestry with mixed Indian and European heritage. So the Métis are mixed, but they are still considered as indigenous. As of 2016 census, there are 977,235 registered Indians through the registry. So there is a census count coming from the registry. This is the proposed ethnicity registry framework. And the idea here is, well, we'll just be building upon the existing certificate of confirmation approach, just substituting the personal information index with the registry form. And in this situation, the goal of this one is to create as minimal disruption to the current system by the NCIP as possible. So really the goal here is to just start to improve start to save this into a centralized database. So the requirements are still the same. Now, in the initial idea here is this person can register through the PSA, hopefully congruent to their application for PhilSys, or they could register to NCIP in the same way that they would have done this with a COC. It would be quicker if they have already a certificate of confirmation. They can just go ahead with PSA. If they don't have it yet, the certificate of confirmation, they will still have to go through the NCIP verification process, as we have said here. Now, with the limited time that I have, we do have existing concepts and definitions with regards to indigenous cultural communities or indigenous peoples, the NCIP, IP membership, and these are congruent to existing laws, specifically the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act, uh, and therefore these definitions are just carried over from there. Now, implementing institutions and reporting system. So there would be a consortium created between PSA, PSRTI, and NCIP, and possible social workers and other government agencies can be involved as well. Now, with the NCIP, these are the duties that we think that NCIP could contribute into the consortium. So the endorsement of participation, data input personnel in cooperation PSA, cultural sensitivity training for non-NCIP personnel on the registry, policy-making member of the consortium, end user of the registry, and data responsibility matters with the PSA. With the Philippine Statistics Authority, data input personnel in cooperation with the NCIP, policy-making member as well, limited into the implementation of the registry, end user of the registry data for statistical processing, and data responsibility matters with NCIP. PSRTI is involved with the training on statistics and database management, research on the implementation of the registry, and policymaking member on the consortium or cooperation in the implementation of the registry. Now, when we would involve civil societies, they may provide endorsement of the registry to the ICCs or IPs, and also, if possible, additional manpower or support in data inputs. This is the involvement of civil societies and social workers are dependent on are privy to the consortium. It depends if the consortium would like the participation of civil societies and social workers. Now, the consortium is between PSA, PSRTI, and NCIP as the initial members. With respect to a qualities checking system, there would be on-field activities, quarterly review process, and an annual review process, which the annual review process, some of them are also the same as the quarterly review process. With regards to capacity building, there would be a lot of trainings involved. We see this if it would be fast-paced, meaning a lot of trainings consecutively organized. This would be done in 3 months. To give some leeway, it would be about 6 months overall. You might have heard of the 3 to 6 months in the past, but this is just expectation. It might last longer or might last less than as expected. Audience would be personnel in PSA and also the NCIP. Involved as well in the capacity building would be the necessary hardware and software for implementation. So in summary, the Ethnicity Registry seeks to build upon the current existing procedures. The data from the registry has potential to aid in devising policies for and increase statistical representation of IPs and ICCs. The framework is based on a working partnership between PSA, the NCIP, and PSRTI so that its use, maintenance, and further development can be facilitated. Capacity building in terms of hardware and technical skills is necessary for the implementation of the registry. This report was prepared with John Hill Sarmiento as research assistant. We are grateful for the assistance extended by the staff of the PSRTI to facilitate this endeavor, and we would like to thank the officials from the NCIP and the PSA for valuable insights in preparing the report. Thank you for listening, and have a good day, everyone.